Hi, I'm BJ, and this is the Arcane Alienist Podcast. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Arcane Alienist. This will be a relatively short episode. I've got a few calls that have come in that I just want to get to, so I'm going to kind of drop this here at the end of the week, and then my next regular episode will drop early Sunday morning, overnight between Saturday and Sunday. And that'll be a longer episode with Carl Rodriguez as my guest, where we're going to talk about the role playing game called We Deal in Lead, which is a fantasy western kind of based on the Dark Tower. Anyway, more about that in the episode that'll come out over the weekend, but I didn't want to let these calls set, so we'll just do a quick call roundup today, and that'll be it for this episode. So we got a couple calls from Jason of the Nerds RPG Variety Cast, and we got one call from Jason and a couple of calls from the Pink Phantom. I haven't heard from him in a while, so it's good to get a call from him. So let's see what these guys have to say for us.
Hey BJ, Jason here. Just listened to your latest episode. Great job. As far as the magic item creation in your world and the way you laid it out, yeah, it definitely makes sense that adventurers are going to come across a lot more of this stuff than anybody else. I mean, look at John Constantine. He always has access to relics and this and that and different magical things, and the average person doesn't, of course. But I don't know. It just seems all that stuff's fairly rare in that world, even though he has access to it, compared to some D&D. And I guess I'm looking more at D&D games where you have magic shops and things like that is being an issue. If you have a D&D world that has magic shops and things of that nature, but it's really hard to create magic items, that's where it breaks. Not necessarily a game where magic's fairly rare. Anyhow, as far as Elric goes, yeah, I don't know. I've got older versions of the books. I need to buy the newer stuff that he's written lately. My problem with the layout of those books are that I really prefer things to be in the order they're written, not the order the author thinks you should read them in. I'd much rather read them in the order the author actually wrote them. So, I mean, if you don't own any Elric, it sounds like that's the way to go. If you don't own any Moorcock, that's the way to pick up the saga. That's the current version. But I would urge readers to maybe consider looking up the order of publication and reading them in that order. But that's just maybe a Jason thing. As far as alignment, yeah, another series that does a great job with it, Long Chaos, is F. Paul Wilson's Adversary series and Repairman Jack books. The Michael Mann movie, The Keep, is actually based off of the first book in the Adversary series. And you have the same kind of idea, not necessarily called Long Chaos, but the same kind of idea. Neither one is on the side of mankind, but where where the bad side wants to totally dominate, the quote-unquote good side just wants to doesn't really care about man, but it wants to use humankind as pawns in the battle against the other side, right? So neither side is good, but one side's the lesser of the two evils. And I really like that kind of point of view, too. So, anyhow, this is going long, so great episode, and I will talk to you soon.
Thank you for the call, Jason, as always. Yeah, as much as I was kind of blown away when third edition came out, and some of the D&D, some of the kind of cool takes on sort of classic D&D ideas. I enjoyed it. I thought it, there's strengths and weaknesses to every system. And at the time, it was kind of zeitgeist maybe, but I felt like it really addressed some things that I had always kind of thought didn't work well or didn't make sense with TSR D&D. At the same time, I just never could swallow the magic item shop. I appreciated that they had some consistent, usable rules for characters to make magic items, which includes going to have some gold piece values to know what kind of, how much you're going to have to invest. But the way they turned those into just sort of a commodity where there was, market value and you know, where you could buy things and you commission wizards to make them if they didn't have them. It's just this whole um, again, just kind of market for magic items, and they were sort of a known entity that players were aware of. They could just look through the book and find magic items they wanted, and somehow their characters knew that those things were possible or existed in the world and how to go about finding them. I never liked that aspect of third edition or fourth edition D&D. They tried to walk it back some in fifth edition so that magic items are really rare and you don't have a magic shop other than maybe to get a few kind of fairly common types of potions and trinkets. But the cat was out of the bag. There's this whole culture of play that sort of emerged around third edition when it came out, in the early 2000s, that I think has stuck with D&D and with Pathfinder and with other kind of modern games. And it's just the cat's out of the bag. You can change the rule set to try to do that, but players are still that they've sort of learned to approach the game in a certain way that just kind of sticks within the culture of play in certain circles. But yeah, I don't like the idea of magic item shops. I think that's the hallmark of a high fantasy. It's okay in a setting like Eberron, where magic is sort of basically basically the basis of modern technology. It's just magic instead of technology. But I don't really care for it in a typical even high fantasy setting. I still feel like magic should be people are aware that magic exists, but it should still be sort of mysterious to the commoner, right? So uh, with you mentioned the adversary cycle. I'm going to put a link to that. That's available on Amazon. They've got I don't see a audio version of it, but they do have paperbacks, hardbacks, and Kindle version. So I'll put a link to that for that series, the Adversary Cycle by F. Paul Wilson. Thanks for the recommendation on that. Yeah, the idea that law and chaos aren't necessarily good and evil. It's just you know you might have a vested self interest in maybe erring on the side of the law, just if you had to pick between the two. But they're clearly using you in their cosmic struggle. It's just maybe their version of the world is a little safer than the chaos version, but it's also could be potentially a little more oppressive. So, but yeah, thanks again for the call, Jason. Now we will hear from the Pink Phantom. So let's hear from him.
Hey BJ, the Pink Phantom here. I've been listening to your last couple of episodes talking about metal plates, metal pages being the spell book, and I was listening to the last episode, Jason talking about how it never gelled with him how magic was difficult to find, but then adventurers could accumulate magic. And I wonder if the way to kind of square that circle is what if the metal that the plates that the spellbooks are made of need to be precious metals, gold and silver and platinum. They're the ones pure enough to hold magic without corroding and rusting away. And so for most folks, when they find them, they just see these big slabs of gold and silver and platinum and they melt them down and turn them into coins or sell them off and things like that. And that's why magic would be rare. And same thing could be true of magic items. They could have that in them as well. And so they just get melted down by regular folks. I was also thinking that for scrolls, I've read and heard about how archaeologists, when they run across inscriptions on walls and stuff and they want to copy it, they take a rubbing where they take a piece of paper and they use some kind of, like a big pencil or charcoal or something to rub the paper so they get a negative image of it on there. And I wonder if that's how scrolls can be made. Special paper that can take a little bit of magic without being destroyed until it's activated and it's laid over the plates, and you have some kind of a special kind of rock or pencil or something, some kind of special ink that you rub over it, and it keeps the magic from seeping into most of the paper so it doesn't get destroyed outright, but it keeps the runes or writing or whatever as a negative image, and it can withstand that until the magic is actually released.
Hey, Phantom, thanks for the call. I love the idea that they are. I had actually toyed with the idea of are they precious metals, but then I thought, well, then I'm gonna have to come up with a value for the amount of gold or silver in it. But it maybe is a good. I think as you say that it even does actually work. That they're precious metals, they're useful metals, they're valuable metals, and so somebody who's kind of ignorant of it, just melts it down for the gold. I think who knows how much of antiquity is lost to grave robbers who would have found things that in the modern area an anthropologist or archaeologist could learn something about a lost civilization. But grave robbers, found the artifacts and just used them for melted them down for other stuff. Or, mummies used to be seen as sort of cheap and disposable, and got destroyed before they became a thing to be preserved and studied by scientists. So yeah, that this idea that there's this lost civilization or this ancient civilization, that's how they recorded their magic and their arcane knowledge and wisdom, and that in addition to just trying to recover those things to get the knowledge, you got to keep them out of the hands of the uninformed, maybe more people who are more just interested in the treasure aspect of it and don't appreciate it for it being a work of art or a source of higher learning or anything like that. That would be an interesting story, even if it just popped up once. But I think that would also be an interesting recurring theme in a campaign of trying to protect these things as artifacts in addition to treating them as sources of power. As far as the rubbing, that is again, I think we're on the same page there. I don't think I mentioned it, but I kind of thought about that as I had a similar idea of how that might work. And I think it's a good idea that you can't just, there's still something magical about the process. You would get your scroll, not necessarily by transcribing, but possibly by doing a rubbing, but it can't just be a simple rubbing with cheap materials. It has to be done correctly, and you have to invest some care and some resources into it. But when you're talking about that, it makes me think of the scene in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, where he takes the rubbing off of the knight's shield to help give him the location of the Holy Grail. So yeah, that would be good for scrolls. So a couple really good ideas. I appreciate what you're talking about there, and it's good to hear from you. Thanks for the call. So that's it for the calls for this episode. I want to thank Pink Phantom and Jason Connerly both for their calls. I'll put links to their podcast in the show description for this episode. And that's it. Thanks for listening. Take care of yourselves out there. And like I said, I'll be back in just a couple of days with Carl Rodriguez, and we're going to dive into We Deal in Lead. So we'll see you then. Thanks. Thanks for listening to the Arcane Alienist podcast. The music you're hearing is Come and Get It by Scott Holmes Music. The cover art is by Dave Bone. Be sure to check out his stuff at ironseer.com. You can leave me a message. I have my SpeakPipe account linked to the show description. You can also send me an email at arcane.alienist@gmail.com. Just embed a voice memo, or I'll just read the text to your email during a future episode. Once again, thanks so much for listening.